Hello guys, thinking through code over here and finally going to talk about the grid geometry manager. After all those videos about frames and theory, we're going to get right into it and show you two basic concepts on this video. I made it into part 1. I'm going to make another part 2 because there's a lot to cover with grid geometry manager and there's a lot of things that can happen with it. So without further ado, let's get right to it. So grid is very simple. It's just a grid. From what you can see in front of you on the screen, you're going to have your columns numbered on the top from 0 in the far left, 1, 2, 3, and so forth, all the way to the far right. And then your rows are actually going to be on the left, and they're going to be starting at 0 on the top and then going bigger and bigger as you go down. So things stack upon each other. So when you place something, say for example, when you're going to first place something into your GUI application, most likely you're going to place it in the grid where you have your column 0 and your row 0 as displayed right in front of you. So when you decide to place something to the right, you're going to obviously place it into the column 1. If you want to place something below the element that you placed on 0, 0, you're going to place it on row 1, column 0. And that's how you're going to place things on your GUI application. Now, the size of it all, it's going to depend on many other factors that I'm going to explain on further videos. So you're going to be able to expand some columns and rows depending on how you want your GUI application to look at. So here's the first element we're going to talk about. We're simply going to talk about how we've been calling grid without any arguments inside of it or any row configurations or column configurations. We're going to get right to it with a practical example. Okay, so we go into our practical side of the video. From what you see, I deleted the previous lines of code. I want you guys to gain more practice and to code as I do. Remember, programming is all about practice. The more projects you do, the better you'll be. I also divided my window into the styling, widgets, and grid configuration sections. That's in order to be more organized. I think it's a good habit to have because in the industry, if you want to make someone review your code or edit your code, it's better for them to be well oriented, and it's also easier for you. And if you write code a month ago, you want to get back to it and you want to be able to properly understand it. So we're going to create our mainframe. As always, we call the TTK module. And within it, we're going to use our frame class. Our parent widget is going to be our root, our main window. We're going to give it a width of 250 and a height of 250. So it's going to be a perfect square. And like I previously explained, guys, you can create as many widgets as you want, but as long as you don't place them in your window, they're not going to appear. So we're going to call our grid method. When we run our code, we actually see that we have a 250 by 250 square, which is obviously, we know that that's our frame. That's a clear indication there. To make it easier though, we're going to add a styling element. We're going to give it a color. And to do so, you already know we need to create an object from the style class. So TTK module dot operator, and we call our style class. Okay. So now that we have our object, we need to configure our style and associate it to our mainframe. So sconfigure. The name that we're going to give it is mainframe tframe because we're dealing with a frame, and the background color is going to be, we're going to go on color hunt. And you know what? I really like this dark color. So we're going to take it. We take the hexadecimal code, paste it in there, and don't forget to add your hashtag. And then last step, obviously, we need to give it a style argument. So style argument is going to be mainframe.tframe, the configuration that we just created. If we run this, there we have it. We have a perfect square with the color that we just associated to it. So now we're guaranteed that our frame is there and it's popping there, right? This is very important to show you guys that when you simply call grid, the automatic thing, the default thing that Tkinter will do is that it's going to place it into the column 0 and to the row 0 of your GUI application. So right here, we're on column 0 and row 0 because we simply call grid. We didn't configure anything. And to properly show that, we're going to actually create another frame. So we're going to create frame 2. TK frame. Also put it on the same parent widget onto our main window. We're going to give it a smaller width. So 100 and our height is also going to be 100. So another perfect square is just going to be a little bit smaller. And also another style. So sconfigure, once again, give it a name, frame2, associated to the tFrame class. And in order for it to show, let's give it a color. You know what? The next one in line, that one right there. I think it's like a type coffee cream type of color. I'm not really good with colors, guys. So we add the style arguments, frame2, tFrame, and what do? We're gonna place it into our GUI application with the grid method. And when we run this, we realize that it's right below it. And this is another default of simply just calling grid, right? Our first frame, our main frame, we called it in the same parent widget. If they're called in the same parent widget and you just call grid without any configurations, without saying that this is in row 1 or column 2 or column 0, they're simply all going to show up in the first column, which is column 0. So they're all on the first column, but they're going to stack upon each other. So this is row 1 right here, and this is row 2. Actually, sorry, this is row 0 and this is row 1, because in computer science, we start at 0 and not at 1. So first row, second row. The more you call with grid, they're only going to stack amongst each other. Our second topic of this video is how columns and rows are going to compress themselves in order to take the size of what they're containing. This might be easy to understand when you say it out loud, but it can actually lead to some confusion when people decide to put different things in a container. They realize that some sizes are changing and don't really understand why. We're going to portray this in our next example. So this concept was actually properly displayed in the simple GUI application we just ran. Whenever our GUI showed up, I made it a little bit bigger, by the way, our second frame. Now it's a bit 200 by 200. We see that our column 0 is going to take the space of our first frame. So our 250 by 250, our column realized that, okay, we're at a width of 250, so my width is going to be 250. And whatever smaller in after that is simply going to be centered in the column. So from what you can see, our row also took the height of 250, and our second row over here took the height of 100. So main thing to understand here is that your rows and columns do not have a set height to them. They're simply gonna compress themselves in order to take the size of what they're containing. And also for the other rows and columns don't have anything in them. So what's their height and size? It's 0. That's why you don't see anything there. Unless I expand this, you can really see that the window could really take a lot more inside of it, but that's not what we're going to set our GUI application to be for, right? We're actually going to give it something specific. So like I said, your column here took the space of whatever is inside of it. And in order to properly show that also, we can actually change the main parent for our second frame. Instead of putting our frame on our main window, how about we put it on our main frame? So if we put the parent main frame here and we put our second frame into our main frame instead of putting it in the window, when we run our application, we notice something very strange. What happened here is that since we're on the row 0 and column 0 of our main frame, those columns took the space of what's in them. And this is something that people get confused sometimes when they're like, how come I put something in my frame and then I could not see it? And obviously this is going to happen more with frames, not with buttons or labels, but this happens a lot and people get confused. And it's simply because of this specific concept. The columns and rows of my main frame are taking the space that is of what they're containing. So they're simply compressing themselves to show that we're having our second frame here and we don't see our main frame. And in order to fix these type of situations, you could add a pad. And this is padding. So we're going to put a padding in the X direction of 10 pixels. And we're going to put a padding in the Y direction of 10 pixels. And if we rerun our application, there we have it. We see that our main frame is still there, simply that the concept of our columns and rows taking the space of what they're containing what was exactly what was hiding it. So your main frame is still there. So this is just something very little nitty-gritty detail that I want people to just be aware of, because people do get confused. It's very possible that, you know, they create a frame, they put a button inside of it, and then they don't see the frame anymore, and it's because of that concept. So that's it for our first video about grid geometry management. Grid is very easy to use, and when you first call it like as it is without any arguments, these are the type of things you're going to face. We're going to create a second video in order to show the more complex side of grid geometry, and this is also in order to keep the video short and to only show certain things per video so that you guys can absorb the most out of it and to make everything clear and concise. Like I said, coding and programming can be a lot to handle sometimes, and you really need to practice it, but really taking baby steps can help you a lot. So as I usually say, guys, if you like this video, click the like button, subscribe, and put the bell for notifications. If you have any comments for me, I am more than willing to take them. Have a good one.